Hi, my name is Jessica Green with the Kentucky Department of Education. And before we get into today's professional learning, I wanted to walk you through some resources through the Department of Ed. And the first place is kystandards.org. And when you go to that site, if you click your standards resources, it will take you to all the content areas. If you scroll down on the right-hand side of that screen, you'll see the visual and performing arts resources. And when you click that, the first thing it will lead you to is the Kentucky Academic Standards for Visual and Performing Arts. Often we call it the CAS, K-A-S. So the CAS for Visual and Performing Arts is there for you to access. You can download it or you can use it digitally. And then you'll find this at a glance on that next row all the way to the right. And it is a front and back one pager that walks you through the highlights that are the changes to the revised standards. Really nice talking points for you and your district administrators, your building level administrators, other teachers. And so we invite you to peruse that. Then the next thing I want to show you, same row, but the second one over here on the left is the professional learning modules. And when you go there, you'll find what we're going to look through today, the Getting to Know Your CAS module. And so you'll find an overview of this CAS here and who can utilize it and how it can be utilized. And then you'll find the PowerPoint here so that you can download that and walk through. And in the comments are all of my notes, things that I would say as we're going through that module. And then underneath that, you'll find a downloadable note catcher that accompanies this work. And so here's what that looks like in the note catcher. And it's areas for each of those slides for you to take notes, to do some activities that have some deeper understanding attached to it, and even some reflections. And so hopefully this will be helpful in really solidifying your understanding of the revisions to the Kentucky Academic Standards for Visual and Performing Arts. And Cynthia, as they're wrapping up, I think we're a small enough group that we could open the floor and have some nice conversation throughout, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Ooh, I love it.
Unmute if you.
Yeah, and don't feel pressured to turn your camera on. I got to grab my straightener before I left the house from the frizz, or otherwise I would have probably said, let me turn off my camera also. So don't feel obligated to do so. But if you would like to unmute and share a notice or wondering about the background, we'll do background first on that page 2 of the CAS. Anyone want to unmute and share a notice or wondering? Okay, no pressure. I'll move on to the vision for Kentucky students. Anyone want to share anything for that? Fantastic.
There's a pretty complex list of uh, purposes within the bullet point list at the bottom. Looks at a pretty broad collectively, but each individually pretty specific
Yeah,
list of
excellent. Yeah,
aspects that
yeah,
can help.
absolutely. Really good. Thank you for sharing that. And that leads into this next section, which is the writer's vision statement. And this is where we took the actual input from the writers to talk about what they envision for arts students in the arts throughout Kentucky. So if you'll go to page 5 in the CAS document and look at that writer's vision statement, this is also in your note catcher. You'll notice on the slides that there is a piece of paper with a pencil that indicates that there's a place in the note catcher if you want to capture your thinking. But on page 5, as you read, if you'll capture any of the foundational beliefs you see that you think are important or interesting or just strike you, but kind of captures some of the foundational beliefs of the writers. And so that's on your note catcher on page 1. And I'll give you about 2.5 minutes to look at that. Hey, as you wrap up your reading of the writer's vision statement, I'll open the floor again for anyone who wants to share what they think is one of the foundational beliefs of the writers, or something you enjoyed about that writer's vision statement.
Can I just hop in?
Absolutely.
I what kind of came across to me was that the writers have a deeply held belief that the arts in all their forms that we teach in Kentucky are essential for every student at every grade level.
Absolutely. And Jane, it's always good to hear your voice. But yes, you're exactly right. And I will say, we had a lot of what we call collegial discourse, conversations that were hard conversations throughout this process. And several times we came back to this writer's vision statement to ground us in the goals and the beliefs of the team. And so it was really nice to have this statement. I'll show you, these are some of those, the highlighted sections are kind of our group's favorite moments within that high quality arts education. We hear a lot about high quality instructional resources and really showing that the arts have high quality as well. That student focused lens there, the interdisciplinary connection. And then my favorite, which just happens to be the last sentence, authentic lifelong connections to the arts as consumers, curators, and creators. And oftentimes we end up with the arts fitting into two categories. One, they're going to go on to post-secondary and become educators themselves, or the other one, they're going to end up as a performer on Broadway. And those are like the two categories we kind of put students into. But that consumer category is just as important when reaching all students with the importance of the arts. And so the standards revision process really focused on those three categories to ensure that they weren't leaving any students out and not just catering to the future educators or the future performers that were making a career in the arts. And so that was really, really important to the committee, and I appreciate their focus there. Very good. All right. So the question coming out of that is, how could the identified foundational beliefs impact the student and teacher experience in K-12 visual and performing arts? You know, Jane already kind of gave us that, you know, you can really tell that this was the foundation of their belief and that they were really invested in it. So thinking about how that can encourage all teachers in K-12 arts education as they cater their programs. I'll give you 1 minute to kind of think through that. All right, as you wrap up your final thoughts on this reflection question, we're going to move into the next section, which is the standards use and development. This is where we address some of the misconceptions about the standards. As you may well know, Kentucky is a local control state, which means decisions on curriculum are decided at the local level, whether that be district or school. And that final decision is really in the hands of the superintendent. And so when we think about the standards address what is to be learned, but not address how the learning experiences are to be designed or what resources should be used. So often I get questions about, is there a curriculum or is there a pacing guide? And not from the KDE, there is not, because that is a local level decision. However, there are resources within the CAS on page 7 that kind of guide administrators and curriculum developers on best practices for implementation of the standards. So if you're looking at some of those resources, they are there for you. And so as you review the standards information on page 7, you gotta think about, you know, what are standards and what are they not? And there are some clear points within that section to help guide that thinking. And so I'll pause for a moment and allow you to review page 7 and jot down any notes that you may have. And of course, if I'm moving too fast, you can just type in the chat, slow down, and I can do that. And I'll give you about 1 more minute to peruse that page. All right. So we won't share about what the standards are or are not. The good thing about this particular module is you can take all the notes you need and you can just, skip the parts you may not need. So we'll move right on into some responses to that. So standards are baseline statewide, what students should know and be able to do after instructions, and that's at the end of each grade level. So a lot of times we look at standards and we're like, my kids can't do this. Well, not yet. You have until the end of that grade level or that grade band to achieve those standards. So keeping that in mind. But standards are not a set of instructional or assessment tasks. They are not curriculum. So those are just some reminders. So let's move into the architecture. And not going to lie, this is my favorite part because the changes made by the committee are beyond useful and very, very effective. And I hope that you'll be able to see that as well. And so here we have the layout. If you remember I'm going to call them the previous standards that they were from 2015. They are very closely aligned with the National Core Art Standards. And a lot of our feedback from the field as we started this revision process was to stay aligned with the National Core Art Standards. However, there was a desire for more clarity. And so that was a conundrum that the committee had to kind of figure out how to stay aligned to the National Core Art Standards while providing additional clarity. So a lot of the things you're going to see were in response to that direct feedback. So the 2015 standards were a vertical page, black and white text. And it was hard to know where to begin on the page or how it should flow appropriately. And so that was another issue that the committee really dove into addressing. And so the architecture layout now has these grade level views of the 5 different arts disciplines. And those arts disciplines are dance, media arts, music, theater, and visual arts. Media arts is now in the process of developing a nationwide organization, much like we see the National Association for Music Education or National Art Education Association. There is now a National Media Arts Association, which is really awesome to see. So the committee chose to keep media arts within our 5. There are other states that have removed it because of the CTE pathway, but just know that media arts is still within the VPA document for Kentucky. And so there's a glossary now. There are clarification statements, the performance standards that place this importance on artistic literacy. And this was really near and dear to the heart of the committee members, having a clear definition of artistic literacy. There is a place in your document, your note catcher, to capture this definition if you'd like. But its literacy of the arts includes speaking, listening, observing and viewing, reading, writing, and creating practices that students use to assess, understand, analyze, and communicate their knowledge about all disciplines of the visual and performing arts. So the really awesome thing is all of those criteria, speaking, listening, observing, reading, all of that is just so wonderful to have as part of what artistic literacy is. And then you'll see throughout the document as you get into each discipline, dance has a definition of what literacy looks like in dance, what literacy looks like in music. And so that's really a really nice discipline specific way to approach it as well. So let's get into the organization of the standards. So one of the ways, first I just have to say, isn't this pretty? Isn't it just lovely to see color? As the visual artists were very pleased and they had a very big hand in creating this particular layout. And this was in direct response to a piece of feedback from the field. And I quote it because number 1, it's funny. And number 2, it's real. It was, why are our standards so ugly? And so we took that to heart as we started this revision process. So you have these 4 buttons. Buttons is not a legal term of any kind, but we call them the buttons. And they represent the 4 artistic processes: creating, performing, producing, presenting, responding, and connecting. And so this is kind of the guidepost on every page. That's the first thing you really notice because of the shape and where it's located, top left of the page, to let you know which artistic process you're operating within. And so those are all of those beautiful things. Performing is geared towards music and dance and theater. Producing is media arts, and presenting is visual arts. So that those are the interchangeable touch points for the purple: performing, producing, presenting. And so you've got on page 8 and 9 a place to list your 4 artistic processes if this is new to you. And then we're going to talk about our anchor standards. So the anchor standards, there are 11 of them, and the artistic processes and the anchor standards were the key choice by the committee to stay aligned with the National Core Art Standards. So these 4 artistic processes are in existence with the National Core Art Standards, and so are the anchor standards. Now, they are beginning their standards revision process. If you remember at the beginning, I said this process took 2.5 years for Kentucky. So just know that on the national level, it will take time. They are currently in the survey phase, which is available for feedback across the nation. And then they'll go into that revision process after they respond to that feedback. So in 6 years, when we come back to revise these standards again, we will look at the National Core Art Standards, but it's not something that I'm too worried about at this moment. We are currently pretty well aligned with the national. And so the 11 anchor standards are divided into those 4 artistic processes. So creating is conceiving and developing new artistic ideas and work. And then the performing, producing, presenting is realizing artistic ideas and work through interpretation and presentation. Responding is understanding and evaluating how the arts convey meaning. And then connecting is relating artistic ideas and work with personal meaning and external context. So then those 11 anchor standards are broken into those 4 categories: 3 for creating, 3 for performing, producing, presenting, 3 for responding, and 2 for connecting. Sorry, I get carried away. 3, 3, 3, 2. And so they all feed into what we define as artistic literacy. Now, I mentioned there's a 3rd module. Module C is all about the anchor standards. Module B is all about the artistic processes, and they go really in depth to how to apply those and implement them in your classroom as well. Okay, I'm going to move on to the organizing the standards. So this is kind of a reflection on those of you who are familiar with the 2015 standards, or if this is brand new to you the first time, what you knew, what you know now, and what you want to know. So what did you previously know about the organization of the standards? What do you now know? And then what I would love to hear, if anyone needs to unmute or add to the chat, that would be fine as well, what you want to know. That way, as I'm going through the rest of today's session, I can make sure I hit those things. So what I knew, what I know now, and what I want to know. I'll give you a moment to capture that, and you can feel free to unmute and share or put in the chat as well. Okay. And this is your moment. If there's anything you want to make sure you don't leave this session without knowing, you can add that to the chat at any time.
It's always great to hear from you folks.
I mean, I'll talk to myself all day, every day, so I get it. But yes,
Jessica, I'm going to jump in
yeah,
again.
Jane, yeah, go for it.
And what I'm going to say may be
may zoom out a whole lot further than the structure, right? But I think one of the things that I keep looking for are ways to help teachers who aren't familiar with the content and administrators who aren't familiar with the content understand that the standards aren't kind of one and done. Oh,
Yes.
you covered that standard. You don't need to cover that again, kind of, or I've covered that standard. They know that now. And we all know, those of us with content knowledge know that it's a much deeper process than that for all of the standards.
Absolutely.
But just kind of, and I don't think there's an easy answer to what I'm wondering. It's just something that's kind of an overarching piece for me.
Absolutely. Jane, thank you for sharing that. And I want to reassure you that we did have that conversation as a committee, and they charged me with creating a resource that would help with that understanding. So session B is all about the cyclical nature of the artistic processes and talking about how you revisit. And it includes an activity where the person going through it can take a current lesson and look through the lens of the cyclical nature. Is this just about creating, or where are there places where responding can be added, so that they can leave that session knowing how to apply the more cyclical nature, and not well, I taught, I taught music standard 3, I'm done, move on, but how it can be revisited to strengthen it, to encourage students to reach that mastery.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So yeah, Spotlight B of this module has that section. Good, good, good.
I'm
And
just advanced. I want to jump on.
Jane is ready. Jane is ready. We have differentiation for all of your levels. Don't you worry. I got you. Perfect. And in the chat, Deborah said, want to know the changes. We're getting that. Perfect. I'm glad you're feeling that already. And we're about to get into the meat of it as well, because it's going to the grade level overviews. If you are familiar with the 2015 document, it was split by grade level, but it was split K through 3, 4 and 5, 6 through 8, 9 and 9 through 12 as proficiency standards. And so what that did, if you were a music teacher, you had to go to K3, flip, 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 flip through the other 4 disciplines to music 4, 5, flip again through 4 other disciplines. And so now it is geared by a discipline with K through 12 in one order. So it'll be K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12, all in one kind of document. So if you're a music teacher, you can print music. If you're visual arts, you can print visual arts. So it's structured in that way, but there are now clear understandings of the grade level overviews, like what each grade level should contain. And so when you look at that, there's an introduction to each grade level that talks about what you should be learning in the primary grades and the intermediate grades, and how it scaffolds appropriately by grade band. And so if you look at, let's see, page 11 of the CAST document, you'll see those grade level overview pages. And the biggest thing, those of you who are high school minded, you know, you have proficiency levels and not necessarily grade level standards. And that serves multi-purposes. One is so that teachers who have multiple grade levels in their one course can differentiate according to the proficiency level of the student. There are some schools that use the proficiency levels to rank their classes. So maybe Visual Arts 1 is using the proficient standards, and Visual Art 2 is using accomplished. So there are several ways at the local level that those proficiency levels can be utilized. So it just depends on your school, your program, your students. But take a moment to kind of look at those grade level overviews and jot down anything you see that's helpful for you in understanding what that looks like at elementary, at middle school, and at high school proficiency levels. Okay, so as you continue that, high school folks, keep listening. Elementary and middle folks, you're welcome to listen as well, but this is really geared towards the high school folks. So mentioning those proficiency levels, students who choose not to specialize in an arts discipline, we really kind of aim them for that proficiency level of accomplished. Sometimes it's just proficient at the high school level if they're taking a survey course to capture all 5 arts disciplines, but thinking about what it looks like for students achieving a proficiency level. So that section of the note catcher is specifically geared towards our high school folks, but elementary and middle, there's some value in that as well for you. All right. So the last section of this overview, the grade level overviews, is thinking about the importance of how the grade levels scaffold. Because oftentimes we get into that mindset of, well, I taught my standards, but we're not looking at what came before so that we can address any learning loss that may have been there to get students on grade level, and also ensuring that they're ready for what's next. So thinking, how do each of the grade levels scaffold on one another or progress in complexity? And how does understanding the progression of each grade level inform your implementation of the standards at your grade level? And I will say for high school, again, high school, I'm catering to you right now, but high school music folks, you have 2 strands for traditional emerging ensembles and harmonizing instruments that actually now have standards at the middle school level for you to be able to address to easier see the scaffolding for ensembles such as band or orchestra. And so that was an important move from our music folks about making sure that those high school teachers who are teaching down to the middle school are able to assess those middle school students appropriately. All right. So as we dove into what we call the front matter of the document, that's the whole section that we're kind of reviewing right now, we realized that there was nothing in the Kentucky document about how to read the standards, like the coding language, to be able to communicate with administrators and teachers and those of you who are standards-based grading, things of that nature. And so we are going to get into all of that now. This is probably my favorite image of the past 3 years of my life because we spent a lot of time with it. And every time we put it on the screen, inevitably somebody goes, ooh. And so this is how you get to see how that button interacts in the standards layout. So top left, we have our button with the identification information. And so at the top of that button is the arts discipline, then the artistic process, and then the process component. So if I'm a dance teacher, I immediately know that I am in the right section. I'm in the dance section. This is a creating standard, and we're going to be creating through exploration. So I can gather all of those things by top left. Then on the right side at the top, the anchor standard, the enduring understanding, and the essential question. Those 3 things are carried over from the 2015 version, and they are present in the national standards as well. And so we moved that. It used to be directly under. We moved that to the right because reading left to right allows you to know what is most important before moving on to the next level. And so the anchor standard is there. And remember, the anchor standard is the same across all 5 arts disciplines. And then the enduring understanding is the same for all grade levels within this artistic process. The essential question changes for the standard. And then this new thing, key vocabulary, was a direct response to the desire for more clarity. So we were thinking about new teachers or teachers who have been charged with teaching an arts discipline where that may not be their specialty, needing to know what to know before getting into the language. So now if I'm a dance teacher, I can see I need to know what locomotor, non-locomotor, and stimuli mean in the context of dance. And so I can say, okay, I got to figure out what those mean before I go into the standards language. Then in the middle of the page, you have the standards information. It starts with the grade level or the proficiency level, then the coding, and we'll get into how to read the coding, and then the actual language. And if you see the underlined words, those are the key vocabulary words that we pulled out and placed in that top foundational information box. So the underline is not just a nice little like, hey, pay attention to me. It is an actual hyperlink. And so if you click the word locomotor in the standards language that's underlined, it will take you to the discipline-specific glossary. And in that discipline-specific glossary, it has the definition of locomotor. There are two main things to know about that, however. It is not a legal definition. I have to legally say that. It is not a legal definition. This is a legal document, but the definition is it's a widely received definition of locomotor as it pertains to dance. There are a lot of options for how you would define locomotor. You will find the definition that best helps you understand its use in the standard. So the best example I can give you for that is in visual arts, the word design has a lot of different definitions depending on how it is being used. If you are designing, if you are looking at a design, if it's a design element. So there are a lot of different ways it can be used. So that definition is specific to that. So let me click through so I can give you some bigger views. So that's all the things I just told you about the identification information right there, the artistic process and the process component, and then the foundational information. So here we are again at that language. I'm going to go to this one and come back. So the coding there, I have another slide that's going to break it down even more, but it's always going to start with the discipline. So DA is dance, CR is creating, and then the grade level is in there. But that's probably one of my favorite things about this document is how clear it is to read now, the user-friendly aspect. And then you have the clarification statements. By title alone, you know that this is definitely a response to the desire for more clarity. And so if we got to a standard where we felt some clarity was needed about what that would look like in a classroom with students, the standards writers created one that could be added there. Now, there is not a clarification statement for every standard. And it's not that some are more difficult than others. It was just a decision to not, well, I'll tell you in this way. The team did such a beautiful job making the standards language more clear that when it came time to write clarification statements, some of them did not need a rewording and it just became redundant. It was like, well, that's a very clear standard now. We don't need to clarify it any further. However, they left the boxes so that teachers can now use this almost like a workbook. And they can go ahead and jot their clarification statements or the lessons they're already doing or the ideas they have for implementation. So it now becomes a more usable document in that way as well. And so those are the clarification statements. I will pause there. That is a whole lot of information. Any questions? We also accept praise for the beautiful design that I had nothing to do with. That was definitely our visual arts committee members. Fantastic. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time to play. So within that cast for visual performing arts, I'd love for you to kind of flip through. And by flip through, I mean, use those hyperlinks in the table of contents. You'll be able to click your discipline, your grade band, and choose one page of the standards layout. And if you, normally we would print this out so that you could annotate. In the virtual setting, that doesn't work as well. But just take some notes with like an asterisk to identify the identification information that you see, a plus sign beside the foundational information, and highlighting the standards language with an underline for clarification statement. So if we were in person, that's what I would ask you to do. In this virtual setting, just spend some time flipping through a few pages of your standards layout so you can see that beautiful consistency and cohesion between the document. And I'll give you 2 or 3 minutes to just play. And during that time, the mic is open. If you have specific questions, the chat is open and I can address some of those. So let's take 2 minutes and 42 seconds. About one more minute on this section. I am keeping an eye on that chat if you have any questions along the way. All right, so we'll have some more time to explore, but I'll go ahead and move on to how to read the coding. And you can see in your note catcher, you've got some sections where you can jot some of these things down as well. But the performance standards are coded to reflect several different things. You've got your arts discipline, then the process, anchor standard, process component, and then the grade level or proficiency level. And so it is listed in that order. And when you get into it, here's some examples. So this is a dance standard. It's a connecting artistic process. It is anchor standard 10. The process component is the first of that list. So if a process component or if a standard thread has more than one process component, it would be identified in that space. And then the grade level is at the end. So DA CN 10 1K is that standard. On the middle school level, it's going to look very similar. Theater is TH. Presenting or performing for theater is PR. And then grade, it looks like that's anchor standard 6. It's the first process component, and then it's grade level 7. So it's a 7th grade standard. I love that the grade level is at the end because you can see by the bookend, theater 7th grade. You can just glance at it and capture those big points. It gets a little bit more complex when we get into some of these other areas. You can see this one has a 2-part, it's a multi-part standard. So after the grade level at the end, you will see an A or a B. Depending on how many parts. You may see a C as well. So this is a media arts standard in the creating process, anchor standard 3. There's one process component for grade 2, and it's the first part of that standard. So that little A or B indicates a multi-part standard. And then we have for the high school proficiency level, this is where it starts to get a little funky. One of the big changes for the proficiency levels at the high school is they used to be indicated by Roman numerals. So if you had a proficient standard, it would be Roman numeral 1. And once you started getting all of the coding together, it was sometimes hard to tell if it was the number 1 or the Roman numeral 1, and it just caused a little more confusion. So we did update that to be the shorthand of the proficiency level. So proficient is PROF, accomplished is ACC, and advanced is ADV. So now you don't have to translate. A big reason that came to us was through instrumental, because the Roman numerals indicate something completely different in their world. It's the level of difficulty of their repertoire. Also in assessment for large ensembles, you can get a 1 or a 2. So it separates the standards from those performance indicators in those areas as well. So you can see here, that's a visual arts accomplished standard for the proficiency level in the creating. And the one on the bottom is a little bit different as well. High school is special. High school music is special. I was a high school choir teacher, so I can say that without feeling like I'm judging anyone. We are a special breed. They have several strands in their music standards. And so the traditional and emerging ensemble will have an E added right after the discipline to show that it is the ensemble strand. Same thing for composition and theory. There's a C for composition. And then for harmonizing instruments, there's an H for harmonizing. So they have an extra indicator because of their multi-strands. And that's just specific to high school music. But you can see how that breaks down as well. So I'm going to give you an example or give you a chance to go through your note catcher, kind of look at, again, your area of the Kentucky Academic Standards, and just give yourself a little moment to make sure you are good with the coding. So I'll give you about a minute or so to do that. All right. Moving right around. Now I've given you guys the condensed version of session A. So you're at the end of session A because I'm going to get into one of the other sessions, and it's probably going to be session B because Jane had that question specifically about the cyclical nature. So we'll probably dive into that one as our ending portion. But for session A, you explored the front matter. And you looked at also the writer's vision. You investigated the general architecture and components of the cast. And with the reminder that those additional sessions will go more in depth. So then revisiting your essential question, how might the components of the architecture support teachers while creating new opportunities for engaging other stakeholders? And I'll give you a moment to kind of jot that down. And you can rock, paper, scissors, who's going to unmute and share their thinking on this. Would love to hear from you. So take a moment to do that. And the virtual floor is open for anyone who wants to share their reflection on this essential question.
I noticed one of the things about the button is it highlights the verb of the component process, which is really helpful for drawing those connections to Bloom's taxonomy type thinking verbs or other verbs from other standards, which can also be really helpful for creating interdisciplinary work as you're looking. So here we're exploring, here we're investigating, here, whichever it is, makes those kinds of connections a lot easier.
Absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. And I will say the committee members that had their favorite copy of Bloom's taxonomy that was very well loved and worn and torn by the end of this process. There was a very specific goal of making sure that the language was age appropriate, grade level appropriate, developmentally appropriate. And so we often revisited that to ensure that the scaffolding from K through 12 was appropriate as we moved through and that it aligned with those process components as well. We got really, really good at finding some obscure words and making it more interesting if we could. So thank you for pointing that out. Hey, any other reflections on this section? Good, good, good. I'm going to jump before we go to the cyclical nature. Let me stop sharing so I can move through some slides. And Dan, I want to show you something that I have a feeling will make your heart happy. Over in session C, and let me know if my sharing is still working or if it has left the building.
We need to see your presentation screen now.
Perfect.
We
Let's
can
see
still
if
see you.
how's that? Okay, perfect. So Dan, this is those process components placed in a chart that can be used as a one-pager as teachers are thinking about what those actions actually look like in their classroom. And so you can see, we thought it would be helpful to go by anchor standard and to have all the disciplines in one place so that in PLCs, common conversations could be had. So they can be talking, because again, Anchor Standard 1 is the same for all 5 disciplines as your common language for a PLC or a community of support. And so you can see Anchor Standard 1 for dance, it's explore, media arts is conceive, music is imagine, theater is conceptualize, and visual arts is develop. So you can start to see the similarities and differences between those focuses of the process components. Not many people have seen these yet because again, this getting to know the cast is new, but this was something that we wanted to create to help with that process as well. So same thing for Anchor Standards 4, 5, and 6 under the performing, producing, presenting strand. You can see how they all align, how some of them are different. You can see music has 3 that means there are 3 standards specific to select, analyze, interpret. So instead of putting all 3 of those process components into one standard, it was split to focus specifically on those. Same thing happens over here. Well, so actually one more, it happens on connecting. But you can see we get almost across the board, Anchor Standard 8 is about interpret. We get to interpret here. Interpret for visual arts happens in Anchor Standard 9, but you can see within that thread of responding, analyze and interpret and perceive and evaluate are the big pieces there. And then here's that connecting strand. You can see theater has 2, interrelate and research. Interrelate is probably the most touchy-feely process component we get. Empathize is in here as well, but you see all of those relate to theater, which is portraying emotions and things of that nature. But those are all there. Synthesize was huge. Relate, almost all the way across the board for Anchor Standard 11. But those are some really cool pieces that I enjoyed about being able to pull out of the standards language to make more usable for teachers. I'll pause there. Dan, does it make you as happy as I think it makes you?
It does. I really like the way that that goes across.
Perfect.
One thing, just because I don't know all of the other discipline standards, it looks like the anchor standard number is somewhat similar within, like, related within each domain. So for example, or anchor standard 10 got a lot of synthesizing, connecting, empathizing. So, but it's just sort of that same idea, but adapted within the discipline.
Absolutely. Yes, very much so. Because again, across the board, if all 5 are supposed to have the same anchor standard, the focus is what is discipline specific, but it all lives in the same focal point. Yeah. Good, good, good. Okay, I'm going to jump around a little bit. Let me try to get back to section B here. Here we go. So this, I'm going to go quickly through this section because you've kind of already had it, and give me a moment as I present to get back to the right view for you all. So it's on my screen now, but I'm going to switch it up so you can see it. And there it should be. We good? Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. So some of the stuff at the beginning of session B repeats from what you just had in A, and that's so if folks feel like they just want to start at B, they can get that. So this is more in-depth on the artistic process of creating, and this is where we would ask teachers to take their own lesson or unit and assess it against the changes to the creating standards and be able to improve upon it. Same thing for the artistic process of performing, producing, presenting, is being able to look at a current lesson and then update it according to the revised standard in that language. Responding, same process, and then connecting. So then we get into the cyclical nature. And Jane, this is centered around kind of what you mentioned early. The process order may vary. Now, sometimes I embarrass myself and I say some of my favorite lyrics, put that thing down, flip it, and reverse it. Because the cycle can be changed. It does not always have to be we create, then we perform, then we respond. And sometimes we get into that rut. Sometimes you respond to an artist's work before you can create, and then you present it. But then sometimes you create and you have to go back and respond to it in order to refine it, which is another creation. But all along the way, connecting is the central point. Oh, Jane's happy. Yeah. Good. I like that. But that is the connecting is the central point. And so I tell people a lot, if you start with the anchor standards, you will get to the crux of it. And that is the cyclical nature. And so with this piece, as you're going through your note catcher, you may see this. There's some links that I would have shared that give an example of a dance lesson where you could indicate, okay, this is creating, this is responding, this is connecting, and this is performing, and then allow you to start to see how moving in and out of that cycle is more beneficiary to the school. And I use the example as a former high school choir teacher. If I say we should know measures 19 through 42 by this date, and I walk in, and no offense to tenors, but the tenors have not learned, they've not retained anything, I cannot move forward. We cannot move to the next thing. I have to assess on the spot, and I have to reverse my cycle and go back to reteach, to reassess, to do those things. So we do this naturally. It is not always as natural for administrators who are used to subject areas that have to build upon concepts before moving forward, where you can finish one and then move on to the next one. That's not as natural. For us, it is very natural. It's very ingrained in what we do. We assess on the spot and we move forward accordingly. So this is to help in a way explain this mental process that we as artists do on a regular basis and make it more academically understandable. So I hope that this is more helpful in the process of this. But there's a section in that note catcher and activity that allows you to take your own lesson and really assess, am I really going through the cyclical nature, or am I in the rut of we create, we perform, we respond, and then we move on? So that was one of the things I was really excited to be able to offer in terms of, are we reaching all of those pieces? So that's session B. You can see why that's its own session. It's almost like a work session. The goal with that one is to be able to leave with usable material that has been updated to the revised standards and that way of thinking of a more cyclical nature. Jane, does that feel like something that that works for you?
No, I really like that. And of course, you know, like I get it right away, but I really like the explanation of it. And I'm just, I don't want to make this all about what I need, but will you relate this in session B to standards-based grading at all?
I
The
will
cyclical
mention
nature?
I will mention that this is something that can be used in the grading process. However, local
Yeah.
control, grading falls under a local decision. And so we won't be giving any guidance on how to equate this to grading. However, I think with using the resource that are available for the curriculum development and all of those pieces, that it could be very well seen how this could be an aid to the grading process.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and your state level organizations, KYAEA specifically, has already shown me a new resource they are developing that is more of a checklist that shows where you can mark off when you have addressed them. That way you can assess if you've missed some standards that you need to go back, but showing how projects will hit multiple standards multiple times and kind of support them in having those conversations with administrators when it comes to the standards-based grading approach. So I would say check with, I would say for sure KYAEA, what they have working right now is really valuable. And I think the other state level organizations could find that to be really helpful in communicating how that can look in grading.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. So that is that section. We went through a little bit of B. There's lots of slides, so just stay with me for a moment. We went through this. We got to the process components, which I love. There it was. Let's go to this. So when you're thinking about all three of these sessions, of course, you've only had a little dabble in the sessions B and C, but thinking about this is what we want people to take away before they get their 4 ELA credit hours. We want them to think about what 3 concepts are you taking away from the CAS for VPA? What about the CAS for VPA squares with my beliefs? And then what questions are still circling my mind about the CAS for VPA? And that circle is really important to me because I am always in a place of what does the field need? In layman's terms, for me, that Post-it note on my desk says, what can I take off teachers' plates? What can I provide? And so these implementation resources are really about supporting teachers in doing the best work, which doesn't include all the heavy lifting that they don't have time for. So thinking in those ways, that's kind of where I operate. So take a moment, and that is in your note catcher if you want to jot it down, and think about your triangle. What 3 concepts are you taking away from the CAS for VPA? And your square, what about this CAS squares with your beliefs? And then your circle, what questions are still circling. So I'll give you about 2 minutes to do that reflection, and then I'll open the floor for any conversations. You see, when you unmute, like Dan and Jane, you get direct answers and insights. Now watch, somebody will unmute and I won't have an answer and I'll look silly, but go ahead and take about 2 minutes to reflect on that. All right, just a few more seconds to go ahead and wrap up your reflections. And the floor is open for any brave soul who wants to share one of their shapes, either the triangle, the square, or the circle. Or all three, if you are zealous, that's fine too. Okay. So if anyone wants to share either in the chat or unmuting, you're welcome to. All right. So the last thing I want to show you before I can answer any questions, there is an appendix to this module because the standards revision process is sometimes kind of an anomaly and a little misunderstood. And so we didn't want to lead with this conversation, but wanted to make it available. Everyone in the committee can now quote KRS 158.6453. It guides the work of the standards revision process. So every 6 years on a rotating basis, the standards are revised for all content areas. And so again, 2015 was the last adoption of standards, and we started this process in December of 2021, and then brought in the committee starting in February of 2022. And so it's been a really wonderful process, but we know after the adoption in 2024 that 6 years from that date, these standards will be up for adoption again. So 2030, which is crazy to even say out loud, but 2030 is when these will be up for adoption again. Currently, health and PE is wrapping up their standards revision. Science and social studies are coming up soon. Reading and writing has just begun. So you'll start to see these rotations really coming to the forefront. So we do know that these standards are law until the next standards revision process, which will not start until 2030. So these will officially be the standards beginning July 1, 2025, with implementation in that school year. So currently on the website, you'll see the 2015 standards available and the 2024 standards, and that will change on July 1. So just getting ahead of that change, giving your teachers time to really look at their work and align it with these revised standards will be super helpful as they begin their next school year. And really just thankful for the opportunity to be before you today to kind of jumpstart those conversations and to be a support for you. If you have questions, I can take those at this time. I can always go to my email contacts. It's somewhere in here, I'm sure. So that if you have questions about that, you can email me. I have to find which slide that's on, of course. But I'll present that and then change your view so you can see it and capture my contact information. And then, of course, there's a QR code for a survey if you would like to give feedback about this work or request additional implementation resources. That is always, always welcome. I met with music experts today to develop a new resource, and I'll be meeting with the other 4 disciplines this month as well. So we are constantly looking at what is needed in the field and what to address. This new resource includes pieces of teacher clarity with learning goals and success criteria and how to create that student-friendly language from the standards. So while that is a local decision, we can give some guidance on how teachers can approach that. So we're just always looking for ways to help fill the void and make sure that teachers feel supported across the state. So if you have questions for me, I am more than happy to share that and to open the space for those moments.
I just have to say, I'm so happy to see this come full circle. It is wonderful. Yeah, and I think that in 2030, that there is so much. This has been a big transition. I mean, it's huge. I think that it will simplify the work. I think for 2030, but I don't know, but I think so.
I think so too. Definitely a step in the right direction in terms of providing clarity for teachers and those vibrant student experiences for students and keeping them at the forefront. Absolutely. And thanks, Cynthia.
So Jessica,
Yes.
I'm Bonnie Schrock. I am actually the executive director for the National Quilt Museum, and I learned about this through the Kentucky Arts Council and thought I would just jump in. And I'm very excited about some curriculum development that we're working on that meets all of these standards. So who can I work with at the Kentucky Department of Education to make sure that we're including these standards as we're developing these ideas with our artists and communicating with school administrators, because we want their students to experience the museum, and we can create not only the visual arts component, but also related to math, science, literature, all those things based on our collection. So would that be you? Who should I work with?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can definitely start with me. And then for the folks like in the other content areas, I can connect you with my colleagues who are the consultants for those areas. Absolutely. So yeah, send me an email and we can set up a meeting and talk about what that looks like. Because when we're thinking about those vibrant student experiences, you are the type of partners we're thinking about in being able to carry the standards work forward in a way that really engages students.
So I missed your email. Is that somewhere on a slide?
I don't remember if it's on this slide or not. Let me type that in the chat for you all so you can have it as well.
Thank you.
And yeah, for sure. That's exciting. I am really excited about that. Perfect. Any other comments, questions, concerns? General statements? Very good. Well, and if you have no questions now, that's completely fine. You're welcome to send me an email. I'm an open book in terms of being able to be a partner with you on this work and to help move your work forward. And my goal is just to make sure teachers have what they need to be successful, and so their students can reap the benefits. So, as always, Cynthia, you and the Kentucky Arts Council are such an amazing partner in this work, and thank you for all you do to get the word out. The KET is doing 2 sessions in the summer on this work as well, and I'm partnering with almost all the co-ops in every region of Kentucky this summer to provide professional learning to regional areas. So I'll be in Western Kentucky, Northern, Eastern, I'll be everywhere. So if you have teachers or friends who missed this wonderful opportunity through the KAC, let them know to just keep getting in touch to get this information. And they can always go through this module asynchronously to gather it on their own time.